The Meet Me for Coffee podcast is on site this week at the Journal of Commerce Inland Distribution Conference 2025 here in one of my favorite cities, Chicago. I'm excited to have a lot of speakers on the show this week, and we're going to be bringing some great content and hearing a lot of really great insights about what's going on in our industry and the broader supply chain. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us at the Journal of Commerce Inland Distribution Conference 2025. Excited to be here and joined by my good friend Matthew. Matthew, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Samantha. Thank you for having me. It's been a great conference so far, and we're just getting started. It's day one.
Yes, we're just getting started, day one. You're a fellow podcaster friend, so first of all, how does it feel to not be having to moderate this conversation?
I'm not accustomed to being next to the person I'm talking to. I do it all virtually, so this is all a new environment for me, so I'm excited to kind of seem like I'm a professional.
Kind of seem like it. Well, you're a lawyer, so we really hope so. Matthew, would you mind introducing yourself to everyone?
Sure. So my name is Matthew Leffler. I am the Armchair Attorney. I've been practicing law for 15 years, practicing, not perfecting. I'm also an adjunct law professor at Michigan State University College of Law. Go green. And then someone would say go white. I'm sure they're doing that now.
Go white.
There you go. Absolutely. And I got a chance to come to the Journal of Commerce today and talk about the biggest legal issues facing the supply chain.
Awesome. Well, we have about 15, 20 minutes here to have a conversation, and I challenged you earlier. I said, I just want you to talk about what you think the most interesting thing right now going on in supply chain logistics law is. So I'm going to give you the floor and let you kind of set the stage on what you think that is.
I love it. So the most important case right now is the VOS Selections case, currently on appeal before the U.S. Supreme Court. This is the case that has to do with all of the tariffs that have been put in place. The reciprocal tariff started back in April. This is the story. This is the most important case in my lifetime. It's the most important case in all of these people's lifetimes because it talks about the separation of powers and what does our Constitution really mean. So let me take you back. It's 1977 and President Jimmy Carter signs the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, and IEEPA is what we call it. IEEPA allows the president to declare an emergency, and we want that. We want the president to be able to do stuff in an emergency, a hurricane, an earthquake, a fire, an attack. You want emergency powers. But this IEEPA use we've seen in the VOS Selections case is different. For the first time ever in U.S. history, IEEPA has been used to assess tariffs on other trading partners.
Right.
We started an international trade war without any advice or consent from Congress. Now, our democracy is a three-legged stool: executive, legislative, and judicial. And what we have seen happen over the last few months is this incredibly interesting case unfolding. VOS Selections is an importer. Like many of the people here at the Journal of Commerce, they are a shipper, and they are bringing in product from around the world. And what they saw happen was the price of bringing things in went up.
Okay.
Why? Because President Trump declared an emergency. Now, this is not political. It's not Republican or Democrat. Both parties are equally guilty of taking way too much power. But what IEEPA says is that the president declares an emergency, and unless Congress, with the House and the Senate together, can override the emergency with a simple majority, but the president can veto that. And so the only way to stop an emergency, Samantha, is if 2/3 of the House and the Senate agree. And that is impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible. So back in May of 2025, IEEPA went before the Court of International Trade. And in that court, they were found that Trump and the use of the tariffs were illegal, unconstitutional. For one day.
I heard about that. I remember that was like a big announcement.
One day the tariffs were gone. And then the next day, it was appealed to the Federal Appellate Court. And the Federal Appellate Court did another very interesting thing. They kept the tariffs in place, but what they did was they call it a hearing en banc. Okay. Every federal judge in this case listened to this particular appeal. And the Federal Circuit came back just a week or 2 weeks ago and said the use of IEEPA in this case was once again illegal. And they gave the Supreme Court of the United States until like October 15th or October 14th, and the tariffs were going to expire. Well, the Supreme Court has made its grant of certiorari. The case is now going to the Supreme Court. This is what I tell people. This is why it's so important, Samantha. Power begets power. Once you give up the power, you don't get it back. So the next president, whoever that is, whether you like them or dislike them,
Sure.
they will use the emergency powers the exact same way. If you have someone who comes into office and says, oh, climate change is an emergency, I want every internal combustion engine to have a 5,000% tariff. You couldn't stop it. So this moment in time, we are watching something incredibly important unfold before us. And when I was in this room with the shippers and the brokers and other folks at Inland, many had not even heard of this case. But what I will say is interesting is I believe the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the American Trucking Associations, and many other organizations are going to file briefs, amicus briefs, to say this is not the appropriate use of IEEPA. It's incredibly fascinating, and it's one of the things I love talking about.
Yes, well, thank you for all of that, because we hear parts of headlines, and I think we all heard like, oh, tariffs are canceled, and then we heard like, no, they're still around. But I also heard something, and maybe this is related to this case. I think it was Scott Bessent, right? I think he's the U.S. Treasury or something like that, or Secretary. He was talking about how someone asked him on like NBC or something if the government somehow is going to have to issue like refunds basically to businesses because of tariffs if tariffs were have to be reversed. So how in the world do we undo things if we find out that some of them have to be like repealed? Yeah,
that's a really good question. I think the way to approach this is we are very well situated to do refunds if we had to do refunds.
Okay.
Like this is just an ministerial who collected money, refund them back to the importers or the shippers, we call them here. That could certainly be done. What we don't know is what the Supreme Court will do. I think 6-3, 5-4, they're going to uphold Trump's tariffs. I would be incredibly surprised if those tariffs were not ultimately upheld. And I hope that they're not. Again, I'm not political in terms of Republican or Democrat. We do not want emergency powers like this without Congress specifically saying we want to give the power to tariff under IEEPA. So if it does get overruled, can we make it work? Certainly we can get it to work. My biggest concern is if we set the precedent, any president in the future will day one declare an emergency and whatever pet project they have, put tariffs that no one can stop with no accountability and no way to slow them down.
So, question, can tariffs be accomplished without emergency? Like, did this have to be an emergency, or is there another way to do tariffs?
So this is a really good question, because this gets into the fundamental question, what is an emergency? What's an emergency? How could it be done without an emergency declaration? Go to Congress. Tell them pass a law. Advocate for the law. Let Congress vote on it and become a bill that goes in front of you that you sign. That is what normally happens. But we don't behave normally anymore. And I use the war power. So Congress has the only ability to declare war is in Congress. The last time we declared war was Germany in World War II. The story goes, Japan declares war on us, we declare war on Japan, then Germany declares war on us, and then we declare war on Germany. That was the last time the U.S. Congress declared a war. And that's their sole power. So we have given up the legislative power to the executive at a level that is unprecedented, never contemplated by the founders. So could it have been done another way? Of course, but it wouldn't have been easy. It would have been having to go to Congress and ask for things as opposed to just saying, oh, this is an emergency and only 2/3 of Congress can stop me, and no one's going to do that because we're hyper-political. So if you like the tariffs, you should still be very wary of the way they got there, because this is not a thing where you want the ends to justify the means. This is a dangerous precedent that I do not want to see happen. And I think a lot of business organizations tend to agree with me, but we'll see. We will see.
Interesting. Okay. Moving away from tariffs, anything else that we need to be aware of right now?
Well, I mean, we got a really interesting, very nuanced thing on broker transparency.
Oh, right. You know what, actually, I almost forgot about broker transparency. Where are we at with that? What's been going on?
All right, so let me break it down for you. 371.3 is the federal rule that has to do with broker transparency. What it means is if you are party to a broker transaction, you can request documents from that transaction.
Sure.
Generally speaking, every broker forces the motor carrier to waive those rights. You waive the rights under this disclosure and transparency thing. Well, two things have happened. First, the FMCSA proposed a rule on broker transparency. The proposed rule would be you request them as a motor carrier. Within 2 days, you must give electronic records to the motor carrier. Now, they did one comment period, and then they did another comment period, and then they said, we're not going to make a final rule. We're having a supplemental rulemaking in May of 2026.
Okay.
So right now, everything is generally status quo with broker transparency, except the litigation of Pink Cheetah versus TQL. So this case is really fun. Pink Cheetah is a small motor carrier that was moving ice cream for TQL. And they said to TQL, we would like to have a record of how much you were paid to move the load. And TQL said, go pound sand. We're not going to give that to you. So Pink Cheetah went to the FMCSA and said, hey, can you write a letter that says, give Pink Cheetah the records? And FMCSA says, sure. Write a letter, give it to TQL. TQL gives them the broker transaction, and it reveals like a 40%, 45% margin for TQL. So Pink Cheetah says, I want the rest of the 15 or the rest of the 14. Like, give me everything that you did with me. And TQL says, go pound sand. So then Pink Cheetah sues TQL in federal court in DC.
Wow.
And TQL does a motion to dismiss, and it gets dismissed. Now, this is the part that's interesting. This is the fun part. Footnote 3 on page 7. Footnote 3 on page 7. It's very good. The judge says, if you want to try to attack the waiver, say this in your lawsuit.
Yes, I saw this. You made a post about this, and I remember thinking, wow, they really teed them up for like spelling out in the footnote, hey, I can't help you here, but like come back this way.
Exactly.
And we can hear this.
Now, this is why it's so fascinating, because again, like you get this, it's so cool.
Yeah.
If Pink Cheetah figures out a way to survive the motion to dismiss, they will create the blueprint for every other small motor carrier to attack every other broker. So if I'm TQL and I'm doing this lawsuit, yeah, I'm probably annoyed, but it's one lawsuit. If I got 5, 10, 1,000, 10,000, now you see where this thing goes.
Yeah.
So this question of can you waive the right of 371.3,
Sure.
That's what it's about. So the Pink Cheetah case that just came out, we'll see a new complaint relatively soon, but it's fascinating.
That's how it goes. We always need like the first example that everyone kind of watches very closely to see how successful is it, what are the hang-ups, can we learn from this, can it be repeated?
Absolutely.
Can we adopt this?
And it changes the industry.
And then it changes the industry, and it changes the way you interact with your lawyers.
It's like when I tell people, like, and I'm very close with the folks at TAA on this subject too, I do not think the broker transparency is needed in this day and age. It's not designed to do what it's doing today.
Yeah.
The old days, it was a broker who worked on backhauls for the motor carrier, and the shipper and the motor carrier did the deal together, and then the broker went to the motor carrier and said, hey, can I have my percentage? That's what it used to be.
Right.
Now it's two transactions. It's the motor carrier working with the broker and the broker working with the shipper. Two separate deals. And I think the FMCSA, that's the regulator for our industry. It's $1 billion a year organization, about 1,000 employees, and their job is to regulate the safety of 500,000 motor carriers, 25,000 brokers, 4,000 bus companies, millions of drivers, and they're not doing a great job. So maybe transparency isn't something that should be on the table for them. Like, that's not a super big priority, but I'm just a lawyer. I'm just a lawyer who screams on the internet.
Yeah. I would agree. I think it seems lately we have a lot of issues going on, and the FMCSA, DOT both seem to be taking a lot of heat in I would say, layman's world. You know, we have a lot of these political figures right now and news headlines from people who are not involved in transportation, and I always chuckle at that because you see them go, we need to be more careful about vetting drivers, and I'm like, wow, we've known that for the last 10 years. So
I was talking to a friend about this. So yeah, this idea of like the non-domiciled CDL holder, like 200,000 drivers may be taken off the road, and it's a 5% or maybe less than that of our overall motor driver capacity. The national out of service rate is 20%. Like Hope Trans, which is this trucking company that had this horrifying accident, their out of service rate was 35%. So we are watching companies behave incredibly dangerously for a very long time.
And not get caught, not face repercussions.
Just the FMCSA doesn't have the enforcement mechanisms. They don't have the team to go off there and do this kind of stuff. So we're left with private companies doing this, and we have new ways of enforcing ELP and other things. But it's been interesting to watch. There's no doubt about that.
Quick question. My podcast episode I just recorded before this, they were talking about how when you have like these box trucks, sprinter trucks, whatnot, they don't require the same like CDLs. Like you don't have to hold CDLs. In what space do we say, hey, you can't drive this rig anymore? Do these 194, 205,000 non-domiciled go find their way into another vehicle that doesn't require that?
What's going to end up happening is the CDLs for the non-domiciled folks, they're going to start getting downgraded. So if you're no longer able to stay in the country legally, or there's other problems with the CDL, that'll get downgraded, and they'll still be in our country unless someone comes and gets rid of them. So ultimately, I think what's going to happen is there will be people doing intrastate. The regulations aren't as stringent for what you do, and that's probably what a lot of these people are doing.
It's like shifting, if you want to call it a problem, but it's like shifting it to another market.
Make it localized. Like, okay, it's your local problem. They still may drive and be caught and have to get tickets and things. We still don't necessarily know how quickly this is going to start shaping up.
Sure.
We know the number of about 200,000 maybe off the roads, but it might be a year, might be longer. It's hard to tell.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time, so I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. You're all over LinkedIn. You have a podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about these things so people can find you?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on all sorts of places. I like Reddit the most. Find me at Armchair Attorney. I love answering questions for the brokers and the shippers out there. No, I do a lot of content creation. I love to make law accessible to people, and that's what I do on LinkedIn or YouTube, other places that I kind of run around in. And if I'm able to help people, that's the goal. Educate and entertain. That's my mandate.
I have one last question for you, because I know that you have attended this conference before. So what is one of your favorite parts about the Inland Distribution Conference?
I think the convenience to where I live. I live in Chicagoland, so it's like an hour and a half to get here. But no, beyond that, this is probably one of the best conferences when it comes to the quality of attendees. It's mostly shippers that are very interested in trying to understand the best practices, the conversations, especially the stuff that happens tomorrow. They're phenomenal content, and it's been something that I've been really excited to go to for the last 4 years.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the Meet Me for Coffee podcast. It's been a pleasure having you.
I wish we had coffee though, Samantha. I feel like I've been let down.
Yes. You know what I need to do? I need to just bring in like a coffee pot station right over here.
That would be
endless coffee
absolutely
all day.
I would do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening in. We appreciate you for being here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Meet Me for Coffee podcast. We're recording on-site at the Journal of Commerce Inland Distribution Conference this week. If you like this episode, be sure to check out our channels where we'll have multiple others published here this week with content from the show. And in just a couple of weeks, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming, discussing where freight markets and economics meet. I hope you guys can meet us for coffee.